rich man was suffering from an unknown illness. He called for a certain healer who was thought to be able to mend the problems of both the body and the soul. When the healer arrived, he found the rich man sitting at a table in front of a pile of accounting books. So this is the story of the 99 coins. "I can't understand why I'm feeling so poorly," said the rich man. "I have a lot of money, and with it I can afford the best food, the most comfortable home, and employ the finest doctors in the city. But none of this seems to help." He placed his hand on his belly. "Maybe the problem is not in your belly at all," said the healer. "And maybe the best food, the most comfortable home, and the finest doctors cannot help you." "Whatever can you mean?" asked the rich man. "Come along and I'll show you," said the healer. And helping the ailing man, took him through a tangle of streets into one of the poorest neighbourhoods of the city. They stopped at a fence in front of a ramshackle house where children, wearing worn clothing, were laughing and playing in the dust. A woman, obviously their mother, sat smiling on an upturned crate, knitting. A man was playing with a mangy-looking puppy. "But these people are poor," said the rich man. "What can I achieve here? I have spent my life avoiding such poverty, working day and night to acquire enough wealth to keep me from such a fate." "Just watch," said the healer. They sat quietly as the children went on with their game, and the man and his wife exchanged cheerful conversation. "Why, they seem happy," said the rich man. "Don't they know how wretched their existence is?" "No, they don't," said the healer. "But they have the power to heal you." "Really? But how?" The healer led the ailing man back home. When they arrived, he said, "Now I want you to call one of your servants and instruct him to carry a sack of coins to the poor family." "What? Give away my money to such as them? How can that help?" "Do you want to get well? Then do as I say. The sack of money must contain exactly 99 coins, not more, not less." The man grumbled, but he did as the healer asked. He realized that he was prepared to do almost anything to get well. The money was sent, and the healer departed. Days passed, and the rich man's symptoms were not improved. With his servant to help him, he went to the house of the poor family and spied on them through the fence. Things had changed. The children were not playing in the yard, but carving clothes pegs with knives. The woman was not smiling, but bent over a huge pile of washing that clearly belonged to other families. The man, with a look of fatigue on his face, was stacking firewood that he had obviously brought on his bent back from the forest. The rich man was shocked. He had expected to find the little family in a joyous state after receiving a windfall like his 99 coins, and yet they seemed miserable, nearly as miserable as he. He returned to his house and once again called the healer. "So that is the result of my gift?" he asked sharply. "Instead of one person feeling better, now even more people are unhappy." "And do you know why?" asked the healer. The rich man shook his head. When the money arrived, the family were overjoyed. But then they started to think, this money is almost 100. If we had 100, we would be wealthy. Let's hide the money away and work extra hours and scrape together the rest. When they had accomplished that, they then said, if we can achieve this, then we can amass a fortune. So they began to work even harder, stopped playing, neglected conversation, and traded joy for industry. Those poor people, said the rich man. He sat up in his chair and removed his hand from his belly. It is the worry about money that has made them unhappy, and made me ill too. From now on I will stop fretting and scraping coins and start living. I feel better already. The healer smiled and said, wisdom comes in mysterious ways. Now you know what wealth is. It lies not in getting what you want, but in wanting what you get. He stood to leave. Now you must excuse me, he said. I have to stop by the poor people's house and see what I can do for them.
It seems like everybody these days is talking about our broken economy, which is the ugly stepchild of COVID-19. Well, if they're doing that, I reckon it's time that we had a little Unitarian version of the broken economy right here in cyberspace. So let's start with that magic number that we in the West inherited from high Muslim civilization, and the number is 0. There's a phrase you may be aware of called zero sum. It comes from game theory, which is a branch of mathematics. Basically, it means that the number of rewards in a game always stays constant among the players, and that anyone who wins anything has done so because someone else has lost. Well, that's a simplistic version, but it will do. Now, some people claim, rather idealistically, that the byproducts of the game can add wealth in what they call a win-win scenario, which takes away the scary bits of economic competition. Well, I won't argue that point, except to say that anyone who's lived at the losing end of the world economic system in so-called underdeveloped countries will have seen a grim contradiction of that formula. Or perhaps notice that as the home economy allegedly grows, food banks seem mysteriously to multiply as well. Winning, it seems, requires losers. I'm always amused at the name zero sum, because actually if you translate that into Latin, it means I am nothing. That might be a good starting point. So what I want to do is look at the two influences that have always lived side by side in human beings: competition and cooperation. In tribal societies, even the ones still existing that I've seen for myself, there's an amazing mixture of these two apparent poles of behavior. If a small group is to maintain itself in a natural environment, cooperation is essential. Hunting and fishing are done jointly, and the proceeds are shared out among all members of the group. Wealth, if it is accumulated, is shared equally, and people throw big parties to celebrate their good fortune and to thank their gods. Among the Maasai of Kenya, with whom I lived for a year, it sometimes happens that a single cattle owner, as a result of good fortune with avoiding disease or drought, accumulates many more head of livestock than his fellows. He then throws this huge party, gives away most of his animals, along with presents of money and shop goods resulting from the sale of cattle. How much a person is worth is based on how much he can give away. In that society, competition is reserved for the youth who compete to jump higher and run faster than their fellows, just like everywhere else on earth. Competition among tribal groups seems to be mostly limited to their relationships with other tribes. And this is where the admirable elements of their lifestyle come into question. Tribes are always competing for resources. Their presence represents the limits to wealth that the tribe can achieve. There's often some sort of outright conflict or war. I saw this between Maasai and Kikuyu peoples when I lived in Kenya. Despite the similarities in their situation, the hostility between them became total, particularly in times of scarcity. Take that basic image and multiply it by the number of countries and regions and language groups in the world, and you've got a good explanation for why the UN struggles to make any headway in international conflicts. Sociologists call that in-group solidarity and out-group hostility. If that is an adequate reflection of reality, then the one obvious solution begs for attention. The zero-sum problem will continue until somehow we manage to become one group, one huge tribe whose territory is planet Earth. Well, that's the very idea that terrifies the alt-right, the Trumpian types, by the way, the idea of the new world order, of world government. But things are hardening off now. Everywhere, it seems, nationalism and the worship of the nation state seems to be in the ascendancy. Europe and America are rolling back years of actions that have brought us closer together. When that happens, competition rules okay. Competition and its finest flower, war. There's another paradox at work here, too. It seems that the richer we get, beyond a certain level at least, the worse we feel. I know people whose personal fortunes far exceed any hopes I might have for this lifetime. I find that these people worry a lot more about money, though, than I do. Maybe they're richer because they enjoy worrying about money. But I think it's more to do with something inherent in the condition of wealth itself. If you've got, let's say, 10 million banked somewhere invested in such and such a portfolio, what do? Well, you spend your time anxiously checking market reports and wondering if your dough is safe or if it might earn more somewhere else. As that little story has told us, the way to make a poor man miserable is to give him 99 coins. Meanwhile, we've all become accustomed to the background violin music of the scientists, our modern prophets. Oil and gas are running out. Arable land is being lost. Water is becoming scarce. Some visionaries have begun to think of finding a second planet that will save us as famine begins to bite. The climate is becoming inhospitable and may someday see us out. Species are vanishing under mechanized plows, chugging nonstop through land that each year gets poorer, juiced up with chemicals that are themselves dependent upon petroleum. Well, I hate bad news, but I'll put it to you this way. If we keep on doing what we're doing now, we've had it. It's no good hoping the scientists will come up with something to save us. They're the ones who are the most worried of all. Well, what's behind all this gloomy stuff? That's what they call a no-brainer. If we keep on trying to outdo each other, glorifying that half of our natures called competition at the expense of cooperation, keep on demanding an expanding economy and more personal wealth, and turn our natural allies into enemies, we're heading nowhere fast. We're becoming zeros, not heroes. Okay, fine. So where does that leave us? We're minuscule, no bigger than microbes in the world's grand plan, powerless, or so it seems. So do we just go around feeling miserable and waiting for the end? Just like nearly every change that takes place in human history, it starts with a mood. You can call it a spirit, if you like. It's a hunch, an intuition. Because of that, it's something that can be acted upon. On a tiny level, yes. We can take all those things that we do which are not competitive, which have others' interests equally in mind as our own, and run with them. And we can retrain ourselves not to want quite so much, not to use or spend quite so freely. Like those days during the Great Depression. Remember hearing about that? People were all broke, but seemed to have a pretty good time of it anyway. You've heard the stories. Maybe you remember it yourself. We can scoff at the game when it reaches absurd proportions, like building a 2,000-mile wall to keep out immigrants. We can stop trying to prevent every conceivable emergency that might befall us, buying whatever the banker wants to sell us. And we can trust God a bit more, whatever name you apply to that spirit, and trust each other as well. Once we realize that winning somewhere guarantees losing somewhere else, we might actually make a start. If we can get thoroughly sick of pulling in opposite directions and trying as hard as possible for the loss of others in order to gain ourselves, we might start getting the picture. We can stop whinging about so-called sovereignty in this interconnected world, and we can begin looking for ways to be mutually supportive. Our competitors might then take on a more human shape. Stop being mere ciphers in our self-centered estimation. No, we can't change the world's petroleum deposits, but by God, we can help change the mood. One thing is true. The statement made once by a certain politician I won't name. He said, "We are all in this together." And we are. Barefoot water boy in Guatemala and call center employee in Milton Keynes, earnest budding capitalist in Shanghai and fading aristocrat in Surrey, you and me, Paco and Shanti and Kofi and everyone. Now go out there and cooperate. Or else.